Hi, I'm Josh124 and in this video I'll be taking a look at the 3D maze level in the Game Boy game The Fidgetts. So this is the starting point and you can move backwards and forwards. You can only turn in certain scenarios, you can't turn to face a wall, generally speaking. I'm trying to hit left and right here to turn but it's not working. So you have to be at like a junction where you can take a separate path in order to turn. You can move forwards or backwards. The sort of compass notation at the bottom left shows you which direction you're facing. Again, here I can't turn to face the wall, even though I can kind of spin to every other location. If I'm at a point where I'm able to turn, you can also kind of hold down the left or right button to turn more quickly to other directions. So I can go from north to south quite quickly there, rather than just going north, east and then south. So yeah, and you can't turn, generally speaking, anywhere else. Here I'd be able to spin round for ages if I wanted, yeah. So that's the basics of the maze, that's the controls of the maze, and you can see there's a timer at the bottom right. So I've only got a certain amount of time to get through it. So let's have a look at the actual map of the maze. So I'm gonna get Excel up here. Okay, good, that's displaying. Right, so this is, as I said, a map of the maze. Each of these white spaces, each of these white individual cells is like a single step on the path of the maze. So you can see it's actually very large, surprisingly large, larger than you'd expect a kind of Game Boy game to be able to handle for like a one-off level, a one-off 3D maze level. But there's reasons for this which I'll go into. And you can see, you can't quite see it there, but if I zoom in you can see that it's actually like, the size of the maze is about 80 spaces by 80 spaces, so 80 spaces kind of length and width. If you zoom in a bit further, what you'll start to see is some interesting patterns in the maze in terms of distance. So in particular, any of these kind of junctions, these turning points, will exist on sort of every fourth step, or they can only exist a multiple of 4 steps. So kind of illustrating what I mean along this path here. So I can move 1, 2, 3, 4 to get to a junction there. I can then move another 1, 2, 3, 4 steps to get to another junction there. And then to get to this junction I'm moving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 steps. So all of those kind of distances between junctions are a multiple of 4, and that's consistent throughout the whole maze. If you're walking between any 2 junctions, the distance between them will always be a multiple of 4. Sometimes it'll be quite long. For example, there's a junction there, I think that's probably 16 or 20 spaces there, and sometimes they'll be a lot shorter, like that one there where it's just 4 spaces. So what this also kind of hints at is the way that the game is handling the maze. So when you come down to it, this maze is actually 4 times larger than it needs to be, when you consider that each junction is going to be at least 4 spaces away from the previous junction. You could actually shrink the maze down by a factor of 4 essentially. So you can think of this maze as a much smaller maze which has been stretched by a factor of 4. So in reality, in a sort of perhaps in a programmatical sense, it's actually a 20 by 20 maze which has just been stretched out to look larger than it is. the complexity of it is really just a 20 by 20 maze. And then you start thinking about, okay, so what happens in the gaps here? So we know it's 4 steps between junctions, and we know that we can't really turn left or right in these sort of intermediary steps. So how is the game actually tracking those steps? It's not really doing anything on those steps in terms of allowing the player to do anything else there. So what's actually going on? And something we're going to look into now is you can see by these highlighted areas that clearly something can happen there. So I'm going to try walking backwards for a wall here. So let's get to that point. Switch back to the game. Okay, let's reload so we've got plenty of time. Okay. So this is the point I need to be at, where I want to do my investigation of what happens if I try and walk backwards through this wall that's on the left here. Clearly there's a wall on the left, I can't even turn into the wall. But if I face east and walk backwards, the game will let me walk backwards for a little bit. It will actually let me walk backwards for 4 steps, and then it will crash, as you can see here. So that's interesting. So let's reload. Let's take another look back at the maze in Excel. So we tried to move 4 spaces backwards there, and we did actually get 1, 2, 3, probably got to here to be fair, and the game then crashed. So what that sort of indicates to me is that the game isn't really tracking your position as such, your exact position in the maze on these kind of intermediary steps. It just knows, okay, you were at a junction and you're now 1 step away, 2 step away, or 3 steps away from that junction. And it's when you get to that 4th step that the game's like, okay, so can you do anything valid here? Can you turn left or right? I'm interested in your position now. That's what the game's saying. And of course, when you've kind of clipped through the wall, it tries to track your position on that 4th step, and it realises that you're out of bounds. But it doesn't really realise it. It tries to deal with the fact that you're out of bounds, and it deals with it quite poorly, and the game crashes, as we saw there. So let's have another go at something else here. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and clip backwards through the wall across this yellow path here, and in theory there's a space that we can arrive at on the other side. Now it's not at a junction, so we'd be facing a wall that we wouldn't normally be able to face. So what happens in that instance? So let's go back to the game. Okay, and let's reload. Make sure we've got plenty of time. Okay, so I want to turn right here. I want to turn left here. Okay, so I'm at the corner now. And what happens if I move backwards? 1, 2, 3. I'm doing it a bit slower so that you can see that it's not like the game is showing you that you're stuck in a wall. It's showing you that there's a path in front of you. So the game clearly doesn't recognise that you've gone through a wall. It doesn't show a wall there. But when we do the 4th step, and you can see the game still sort of sees a path in front there. You can see I'm trying to turn left, right, move forwards, backwards. The game's essentially soft locked here. It's not as bad as it was before. I think it does recognise that you're sort of on a valid location in the maze, but because you're facing towards a wall, there should be a wall here. It's kind of not happy with the situation. it's not, it doesn't know how to handle it, kind of how to give you options to proceed from here. So if we look back at the Excel maze again, yep, so we've gone across here and we've got 2 here. We're facing downwards, which we wouldn't normally legally be allowed to do. So in theory, if the game were able to kind of handle things better, we would be able to kind of turn and then just carry on about our way, but it can't, because it's kind of, I think it just doesn't like the fact that you're facing a wall that you shouldn't be able to face, so it doesn't know how to get you out of that situation. So there's a final scenario here, which is kind of the green highlighted bit here. So what's interesting about the green highlighted bit here is that this is going to be putting us, once we've clipped through the wall, it's going to be putting us at a junction. So a junction where we've got kind of valid turning points. And in theory, kind of playing the game normally, you would be able to face this wall, because you could come at it from like the north and be walking south into the wall, so you'd then be facing the wall there. So in theory the game should deal with this a bit better, and perhaps we'll get more options out of that. Okay, and another point to note here is that in this kind of yellow situation, this situation where we're soft locked, if I go back to the Game Boy view, so as the time ticks down here, what actually happens is you just get the game over screen when it gets to zeros. So it's like you haven't been able to do anything, it gets the game over screen, and the game just goes back to the title screen and continues as normal. It hasn't caused any odd corruption of the game or anything like that. It's just that it's basically soft locked you. So let's have a go at this clipping through the wall to a junction scenario. Okay, turn, and then we're going 1, 2, 3, and coming up here's the 4th step. And you can see that it's put a wall in front of us because it knows that there should be a wall there, and it knows how to handle the scenario, because that could validly happen through a kind of normal play of the maze. And in fact, I can now turn. I've got free movement, so I can just kind of walk forwards, backwards, carry on my way, whatever I want to do. I can't face that wall directly here, but if I went along here and I turned south, I could get back to the wall, and if I so wished, I could walk backwards through it again, and I've gone back to where I was at the start when I started clipping along this green path. So I can just go backwards and forwards through this green path, and it's all fine. So let's go back to Excel. So yeah, we've been able to clip back and forwards through there. So in theory that could be useful. That could be useful for like a speed run of this game, to clip through a wall that you weren't actually able to. So what I've got on this map here is the red X's illustrate the path that you would take in a speed run of getting through this maze. And unfortunately there's no way to kind of use the clipping as a shortcut, because there's no gap that's like four spaces long, 4 tiles long. The best you could do is probably here, where you could in theory clip through that bit of the wall, but it's not really any faster than going up and along, going along and up that way. There's no time saved there. In fact, it would take longer because you'd have to get in position. In fact, it wouldn't be possible, would it? Because, yes, the game wouldn't actually let you turn towards that wall. You wouldn't actually be allowed to turn to face south, so you wouldn't be able to clip through there. So there's really nothing. So you could, for example, try running up here, clipping through this wall, but you wouldn't get far enough. You'd only get to like here, and then the game would crash because it's 4 spaces and it wouldn't recognise what your position is. So yeah, that's a kind of brief examination of the 3D maze in this game. I don't know if there's anything more that could be found in here. It's interesting that there are there's a certain glitchiness to the maze, so I do wonder if there's more to be found here, but it doesn't seem like there is from a kind of speedrun perspective. So yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed this video, this examination of the maze, and that's the end of the video.